Okay, should be good to go.
Okay, thank you. So this meeting is a budget open house. It is a much freer format of a meeting. I don't believe we have an official chair of the meeting. Please feel free to put questions into the chat or raise your hand. Sophie, I trust you to help me to navigate questions as they may come up. I'm going to present the material. It's for the most part quite similar to what was presented at the council meeting on March 13th. There's a few extra new slides addressing some things that may have come up since then that I wanted to provide additional information on. But I'll just start by sharing my screen and going through the presentation for you. Thank you. Make sure you have it there. Okay.
Kristen, can you get rid of the tracking on the side so you just have the actual main part?
Do you have it the way you want to see it now, or does it still have that?
Well, no, it's still got your slides on the side as well as the main slide.
Okay.
But I think if you go onto slideshow, you can pick
Yeah,
something that.
It just picked a different screen. So let me try unsharing and I'll try again. Sorry about that. This is a upgraded version of Zoom and I'm not fully functional with it yet. Sorry. There. Does that one work, Councillor Morse?
Try going into the title called slideshow.
I have it.
There.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll just dig that over.
There we go.
How's that?
That's good.
Okay. My name is Kristen Watson and I am the CFO for Bowen Island Municipality. And welcome to the first budget open house presentation of the information that's included in the 5-year financial plan that's currently under consideration by council. This plan is it's out for public consultation. We're asking for public input and council will be considering any and all comments, feedback received, and we'll take that into consideration in the final format that goes before council for adoption. I changed the screen, but I don't think you have it. Sorry.
I think it might be opening the slideshow like in a new window. So you might
that's what's happening to me.
So you might have to like open the slideshow from beginning and then share your screen and zero in on that window.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. Sorry again. It's okay, here we go.
These are time-saving devices, right?
Right? Okay, this one this time. And try from the beginning. There. Okay, you got it. I had to share a screen that had absolutely nothing on it, but worked for me, so. Okay. So there's some underlying, I just want to confirm you've got the right screen now, do you?
Yes.
Sophie? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So underlying this plan, we have to make certain assumptions that that we are basing all of our decisions on when we're deciding what to use for inflation, for interest rates, how to estimate future costs. In this budget, we've got the assumption that inflationary pressures are probably going to be here with us for a little bit. We've included a provision for salaries and benefits starting this year to increase them by 4% for 2023. And then we've increased everything else by 3% for each of the following 4 years. Underlying assumptions include that interest rates are here, going to be a little bit high for a little while to come. That's good news for us from a savings perspective. We have all of our savings held in high interest savings account at the moment. They are earning about 5%. We do believe that in the medium term that rates will probably drop a little bit. So we're just kind of taking a conservative approach and estimating about 3 to 4% on savings for the time being. This is, like I said, it's good for savings. It's not good for the current debt that we hold on the fire truck. There's a balance of about $567,000 on that loan, and that's a floating loan at a variable interest rate. So that one moves around as interest rates go up or come down, but the rest of our debt is all fixed. It's long-term debt, and the interest rates on those debts don't change no matter what happens with interest rates in the short term. We are making an assumption that that population growth will, although it may be high, we're going to make the assumption that it is not going to exceed the extraordinary growth that we experienced between 2016 and 2021. So that was for the 5-year period. The growth rate was 15.7% for the entire 5-year period, which averages to about 3.1% per year. And we're going to take that assumption that that we will not exceed this rate of growth through the next census period, which occurs in 2026. And this is important. It has implications for us for the funding of police services on Bowen Island. So presently, police services are very much subsidized by the provincial government. We only have to pay 30% of our actual policing costs. Once we go over 5,000 population as a community, we are then responsible to fund 70% of our policing costs. So that is a big jump, and it takes place the year after your community goes over 5,000. So we are planning for that. I am proposing that Bowen Island establishes a new reserve fund and starts to put money away incrementally into that reserve year after year to sort of over time get that tax rate up to a level that can annually sustainably fund that expected cost. There's very little data available from the federal government at this point, the provincial government, about what the actual cost share, what that amount would be. But other communities, we're learn from their experience. Other communities are talking about it, and we are in communication with other communities and with the RCMP ourselves to really just get a sense of what one can expect to pay for those eventual costs. It would include taking over the RCMP assets. The RCMP owns 3 properties on Bowen Island, as well as the detachment. And as well, there would be all of the fleet vehicles and stuff too. So it's quite a commitment. It's quite a cost. We are planning for an 8-year period to get there before we think that we're going to go over that 5,000 population. The year-over-year property tax revenue requirement from 2022 to 2023 is an increase of 13.3%. Last year, Bowen Island collected 6.5 million in property taxes, and in 2023, we estimate the property tax need is 7.4 million. In year 2, we anticipate a further increase of 5.8%, and that is, of course, for inflation as well as an annual property tax funded contribution to the multi-use path construction of 200,000, which has been integrated into that plan in each of the following 4 years. Again, in the 4th year of the plan, you see another kick up again, and that is related to a capital project that's been included in the 5-year plan for the Works Yard. We don't have funds to pay for that project. It would require borrowing. It would require elector cent borrowing. And that is where you see, again, another jump up on the tax rate there. Year-over-year property tax revenue requirement for an average house in 2023, if we estimate the property value at just almost 1.5 million, that 13.3% increase translates into an increase of about $347 per property owner. Year over year, there's a change in the assessment roll, and it's called, this change comes from a couple different places. One is from the market, just the general change due to sales prices on Bowen Island, and the other is non-market change. And what that is increases or decreases to the assessment roll that come from things outside of market value changes. So for example, they could be new construction or new subdivisions that provide new lots that that weren't on the roll in the prior year. It could mean that properties were reclassified, say from farm status to business status. And in the case of the Metro Vancouver proposal, it could mean that properties actually lost their taxable status and went from being regular residential to exempt properties. Again, those would all be examples of non-market change. So non-market change, it can go up, but it can also go down as well in the event of properties that become exempt during the year. Looking at the basis for the non-market change in the 2023 roll, there is overall about 243 million added to the roll. Most of that is increases in the market value, but of that, 25.7 million this year was due to non-market change. So those were new properties, new subdivisions, new items that were picked up on the assessment roll that weren't there last year. And the impact of that non-market change is to effectively reduce the property tax increase to everybody else on the island. So that 13.3% nominal increase actually would feel, I mean, all else being equal, would actually feel like a property tax increase of about 12.5%, because overall there's $25.7 million of real estate that wasn't on the roll and wasn't being taxed last year. And when we take into account that that non-market change, it will drop the effective property tax from $347 down to about $327 per average household as an increase from 2022. A couple of financial plan assumptions that are dealing with the community center. The plan has been built such that the grant application for the community center cultural spaces, we've submitted a grant application for $732,000. I'm assuming in the plan that that grant will be successful. As well, there is a robust fundraising campaign that is ongoing. And I'm assuming that that fundraising campaign will be successful and that the municipality will manage to fundraise a minimum of $936,000. I'm not someone who relies on wishful thinking, and there's definitely a plan B in place. So in the event that those two funding sources do not pan out, we do not get that grant, and we do not manage to raise those funds as we hope, their council has two options to consider. They can consider looking to the MFA to take on additional debt financing. There is an option for 5-year financing that it must be paid back within 5 years. It would be repaid through property taxes if that was, the kind of a last resort contingency funding plan. Or BIM has been awarded new funding this year from the provincial government. They had a very large surplus this year, $5 billion. And the province shared $1 billion of that with communities. And our share of that new Growing Communities Fund was $2.287 million. So if council were to allocate any of that fund to the community center to complete construction, then there would be no new taxes required to fund construction. So either way, the funding will be in place to complete the structure. And that's why I'm comfortable putting in the fundraising and the grant funds as the frontline method of funding this structure. We do have an operating budget, a revised operating budget, and we are assuming that the community center is going to be open to the public late in the fall, in October 2023. So this plan does include about 3 months worth of community center operating fund costs. We do anticipate that this facility is going to require extra staffing. So we are planning for a new 1 FTE as a facility manager position, as well as about 1.75 FTE, meaning full-time equivalent staff positions, to provide custodial staffing. We need that building open early in the morning and late at night in the evenings and on weekends. And that custodial staffing will ensure that the building is unlocked and open and safe for the public to access at those, early mornings and evenings and weekends. We are assuming that that facility manager position will start in the summer, probably around July 1st, and that the custodial staffing positions won't be needed until the building is actually open. So I've assumed an October 1st start. So overall, changes to the FTE complement from prior year are they're actually half an FTE lower than what we had in this year's budget. And the reason for that is that we did have a 0.5 FTE manager of bylaw. That position was not replaced this year. And instead, we've reallocated that position to within the HR department. We believe that the HR coordinator role has grown over the years and that we need to increase that from a 0.5 to a 1.0. Over the 5-year period, we are predicting growth in operating expenses for 12.5% over the full 5-year period, 7.5 almost in 2022, growing to 8.4 in 2027. The cost of our debt service is quite significant. Approximately 50% of the tax increase, the 13.3%, is resulting from the increase in debt servicing costs, and that's related to construction of our capital projects. We borrowed just over $4 million to construct the community center and $3 million to construct the fire hall. So those debts have been converted to long-term debt now, and we are making those interest and principal payments annually. So what we spent on debt servicing in 2022 last year was 215. It now jumps to 662,000 for 2023. So of that 347 additional annual taxes that we will require from the average property tax owner, about 177 of it is related to this this increase in debt servicing. You can also see, you can also see that it increases again in 2026, and that is related to that capital project at the Workshard that I spoke of earlier, that we have assumed funded through debt service. Capital expenditures that have been included in the budget for 2023, you can see is still a significant capital outlay. And again, that's related to the construction of the community center. Obviously, there is $12.6 million of project to complete that structure that has been allocated for the 2023 fiscal year. Looking in a table format, the capital budget is kind of set up that we've got these annual envelope funding amounts that that we want to make sure that each department has to undertake their ongoing renewal and replacement of equipment or technology. For the Parks Department, we need to do ongoing maintenance and rebuilding of trails and stairs. And of course, in roads and infrastructure, we've got to replace and renew capital assets like road surface or culverts, things like that. So this budget is providing for an annual funding amount to ensure that that the managers know kind of on a longer term what their funding will be, and that way they can better time their projects. They can better plan out what the timing of their projects is going to be. We've got some special one-off capital projects included in this budget. We have the service yard upgrade that has been put into 2025 for $3.5 million. That's a significant project included there. We also have a new piece of fire apparatus. We are anticipating funding a replacement of one of the older pieces of equipment. The cost is estimated to be about $395,000, and we're proposing that that would be funded through the Fire and Equipment Protection Reserve. I did a little bit of digging on what the actual fire equipment inventory is. You can see there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of equipment there, and much of it is quite old. The piece that is being, the truck that's being proposed to be replaced is from 1978. It's interesting, it's a 4-wheel drive piece of equipment. So it's one of the few that is smaller and is able to access steep, rocky driveways. And yeah, it's 1978, and it certainly has served us well. So the fire chief has identified this one as the highest priority for replacement at this point. Yeah. In each of the 5 years, we've included a provision to construct some of the multi-use path. The provision in 2023 is $815,000, and that is assumed to be funded through a couple of grants, $600,000 worth of grant funding and $215,000 worth of municipal funding. So the $215,000, we do have some carry forward reserve money set aside that we are proposing be used to fund the municipal contribution for any work done on the multi-use path for 2023. We have additional confirmation of TransLink grant funding that is accessible to us in 2024. That would require a larger share, a larger municipal share. It's only 50%, so that would require a $375,000 municipal contribution. Again, we did put in 200,000 of that to be raised through property taxes, and the remaining 175 is the remaining carry forward reserve funds that we would have available to fund the municipal contribution of that project. Everything beyond that in 2025 and beyond is assuming unconfirmed grant funds of 500,000 a year and a $215,000 contribution from property taxes in order to fund that project. The on-island composting has been put back into the budget this year. It came out of last year's budget. It was deferred. We are considering different technology, cheaper technology with a local supplier. Last year's project anticipated or included technology that was only available from New Zealand. So it was quite far away, and with the supply chain issues and long delivery, we were quite concerned that that technology was maybe not the best choice for us. So this technology is a local supplier in Bainbridge Island, Washington. Parts would be easy to get, technology and advice and support would be easy to get. As well, this project doesn't require the 3-phase power that the original project required. So we've put it back in the budget for council to consider. We do need to complete the operating plan, and that will come forward to the Finance Committee and council for consideration. And if in the event that council wishes to move forward with this project, we've got it and made provision for it in the 2023 budget. And we do have that grant funding, which covers 2/3 of the project. So we expect it would take a year and a half to do that. So we've got it tucked in kind of for the second half of this year and carrying forward into 2024. There are additional capital expenditures out there. I mean, this is not it at all. Our director of engineering has identified several other capital projects that he considers to be very high priority. And we are going to bring these forth to council. They won't impact the 2023 budget. They will impact later years. So council can still move forward and continue to consider the 2023 budget, knowing that we do believe that there are several projects out there. One of them, of course, is some significant upgrades on Snug Cove Dock. The Carter Road Bridge is a piece of infrastructure that is really at the end of its lifespan and needs to be replaced, as well as an upgrade on Woods Road that he has identified that he estimates would be about $1 million, but is again another project of high priority. So we are having a committee of the whole meeting on next week, March 27th, and this will provide the opportunity for all of the departments really to advise council of what some of those other wants and needs and asks are out there on the capital side. Really what we're going to be doing is asking council to consider additional contributions to our reserve funds in the later years in 2025, 26, and 27. And that will provide us with additional funding to pay for these extra capital costs that until we really finalize our asset management plan, we don't have a really great sense of what they're going to cost. They're kind of placeholders, and we need the public and we need council to be aware that those costs are out there and they're looming and they're on the horizon. We have a plan to make annual contributions to our statutory reserve funds. Our big ones that fund our ongoing infrastructure are our capital renewal and replacement fund, our roads and infrastructure fund, and our equipment reserve fund. The other ones really are sort of more specialized and set up for either equipment or to support smaller ticket items, but these are the contributions that we are we really focus on to maintain and preserve our infrastructure and the assets. I do have the proposal to establish this new police tax funding reserve. So starting in 2024, starting with an annual contribution of 50 and growing quite quickly year after year, so that when those eventual additional costs resulting from the change in the cost share between the province and the feds for our police services, that we have money on hand to pay for that, and that we're ready to take on that added responsibility. In the non-statutory reserves, in 2022, Council approved a $500,000 contribution to the Civic Facilities Fund, and that was set aside as funding for capital construction for the community center. I'm proposing that Council repeat that contribution again this year. As well, I've put in an additional amenity contribution, a developer amenity that was received in January. So the total contribution to that Civic Facilities Fund for this year, I'm budgeting at $628,565. This here is the new funding, which I spoke of earlier. The Growing Communities Fund is the one-time grant from the province to help communities with the costs of providing amenities, with providing infrastructure, all of those added costs that result from communities that are really experiencing growth. We really, I want to say, did well on the Growing Communities Fund grant because our growth rate was significantly higher than many other small communities. The decisions or the evaluation criteria was really heavily weighted on the growth side. So our 15.3% growth rate really worked in our favor when it came to calculating the amount of funding that we got from this grant. So Council needs to decide how it's going to be allocated. I'm suggesting that for now that Council simply put it into a reserve. I was suggesting that we put it in a non-stat reserve because it's likely that we're probably going to allocate that funding rather quickly. Upon reading the letter from the province, it's very clear that the province is not anxious to see anybody spend it right away, but if they are going to hang on to it for a bit, that they want to see those funds be put into a statutory reserve. So that's a fund that's established by bylaw, and any transfers to and from that fund are individually identified in the 5-year financial plan. So then not the next council meeting, but 2 council meetings from now, we will be bringing forth a bylaw to establish that new statutory reserve to receive those funds. Looking at, based on this plan, what we can expect our end of year reserve fund balances to be. So for this year, because of our intensive capital construction projects, we do expect that they will decline in value, but with dedicated contributions to the reserve funds over the next 5 years, we expect to be able to grow those reserves by up to 22% from where we're at right now. It is important that those reserve funds form our contingency funding, our resiliency funding, our ability to manage unexpected one-time events that may occur. And, you know, based on the outcome of the next committee of the whole meeting, where we do demonstrate to council what some other future capital needs are going to be, it is possible that council may approve additional tax rate increases in order to increase the funding to those reserve funds. Just looking where we're at now with statutory reserves, we're in a period where we're pulling more out than what we're putting in. The green line shows the pattern of how much we're withdrawing from reserve funds, and the blue line shows a pattern of what we're contributing to those funds. So ideally, the blue line is always higher than the green line. You can see the green line kicks up in 2025, and that's where we plan to use reserve funds to pay for that additional fire truck. But hopefully over time, that gap in between what we put away and what we spend, hopefully that gap widens. And the plan is to increase the reserve fund balance over time, again, to create that resiliency and that strength and that ability to deal with infrastructure deficits and unexpected events. I'd like to just take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our liability servicing limit. So that is a provincially mandated limit on the amount of money that we are able to spend each year on debt service, being principal payments and interest payments on borrowed money. So what we have right now, we have 6 loans outstanding. 2 of them are in the water systems. We've got $655,000 outstanding in Tunstall Bay to construct their new water reservoir. Cove Bay has just over 2.4 million outstanding for the construction of the water treatment plant. And then the loans that are paid for by all island-wide taxpayers are the community center, the fire hall, the community lands from 2005, as well as the remaining balance on the fire truck loan that was assumed last year. So our current, even though they're water systems, they are included overall in the municipal liability servicing limit. So we are currently at $916,000 for all of those different 6 loans. And our limit it's established as 25% of our earned revenues. So that was approximately $2.7 million last year. So we're at about 33% of our allowable liability servicing limit. We do have additional new near-term loans that we are either approved or we're contemplating. One, of course, is the loan that will be taken to undertake the upgrades in Blue Water Park. That amount, that ceiling amount of borrowing is $3.1 million. It's possible that Eagle Cliff could be looking at a new loan this year or next for $750,000 to fund an interconnection to the Cove Bay system if that grant application is approved. And lastly, in the event that council agrees to undertake additional debt for the works yard, that could add another $548,000 per year to the debt servicing, which would push Bowen Island to 50% of its annual debt servicing limit. And then there are even more long-term, there's potential additional debt required within Eagle Cliff. There's a phase 4 plan eventually for Blue Water Park, as well as a significant amount, $6 million is the kind of placeholder to undertake phase 2 of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And again, that, were those debts to be assumed, we would be looking at another $560,000 of debt servicing, which would put us at about 63% of our debt service limit. And that's we went from 0 to 63% in a very short amount of time. Transfers to and from other funds. These are monies that are transferred between the water funds to the general fund. In this year, we're budgeting for, one of them, of course, is a repayment of an internal loan that was funded for Cove Bay to complete the water treatment plant. There were funds used from the Land Opportunity Reserve Fund. So each year Cove Bay repays that internal loan for the next 10 years. They repay about $124,000 a year, as well as there are amounts that are transferred in recognition of equipment and supplies that are used and acquired through the general fund, but to help support water systems. So, for example, aggregate, stone materials, road-based materials, when a water meter leak is gone and dug up. And so annually there is a transfer amount that's set up to kind of compensate the general taxpayer fund for the services and supplies that are used on behalf of the water systems. Additionally, I have put an extra 100,000 in here to complete the sewer wastewater treatment plant project. In June of last year, the director of engineering went to council when the contract was awarded for the contractor to undertake the significant wastewater treatment plant upgrade. When it was finally awarded, there were about $150,000 of additional costs that were not funded through the initial plan. And at that time, council directed me to come back with a financing plan. The project has not quite wrapped up. It's almost wrapped up. I'm just waiting to find out what the final total all-in costs are before I come back to council with a request to determine what the final split on that last piece of work is going to be. So I've put an amount in here. It's going to be subject to council consideration and final approval. And I think we'll just talk about where we're at in the whole financial plan development process. We did present the financial plan to the Finance Advisory Committee on March 3rd. This plan went to council on March 13th. Here we are tonight with our public open house meeting. We're going to do another one on the 30th. Again, the same information. And tomorrow we are going to have a committee of the whole meeting where we are reviewing the property tax ratio. And that is the split between the distribution of property tax collection between all of the different classes of property on Bowen Island. We're going to come back to council before May 8th with a final financial plan that has considered all of those additional capital requests, that has considered all of the feedback that we have received from the public, and with a draft bylaw for council to give for readings and approval for. We have the utility budget meetings still to be held. They're going to be held the week of March 27th. So we will post all of that agenda material on the BIM website. And all of those meetings are held by Zoom, and anybody is welcome to attend those meetings. The water system and the sewer system budgets will then be included with the Bowen Island 5-year financial plan bylaw, and it all gets adopted as a single bylaw. And the requirement is that all be done prior to May 15th. So ways for the public to provide input. There is a dedicated budget email at budget@bimbc.ca. You can always email mayor and council at bimbc.ca. We're going to have a second meeting similar to this one on March 30th in the afternoon, 2 p.m. We're having our property tax ratio tomorrow, and we have set up a dedicated website page. And I will start to populate an FAQ, a frequently asked questions document, with answers to any questions that we receive or some recurring themes that we may find are out there, and just try to address any additional questions that people may have. And that's it. We'll continue to do our advertising in the undercurrent and through social media. And we welcome any comments, any kind of feedback that the public has on this plan. Council is open and interested, and it's not a done deal yet by any means. So I think that's it. I'll stop sharing. Thank you. So if there were any questions, in the chat, either in the chat or please raise your hand. Comments? Anything, Sophie?
I don't see any hands raised or,
Hi,
Oh.
I can't find, somebody's got to break the ice here, so I'll be foolish enough to do that. And I couldn't find the golden hand that you're supposed to raise. I came to this meeting with two topics in mind. One is, and this will be no surprise, the library. Although I was treasurer of the library until about 2 or 3 years ago, I'm clearly speaking now as a taxpayer and not officially. In fact, I don't know if Don Heth and Tina Nielsen are cringing that I'm raising the issue. But I just want to emphasize how important the library is to our community. I was thinking about this coming weekend. I'm going to attend a book launch, art show, concert blend on Saturday night. Then Sunday morning, I have a board meeting where the board is using the flex room at the annex. And then Sunday afternoon, looking forward to the Nature Club and Conservancy presentation on Deep Bay. So just want to emphasize that the budget is a catch-up budget, as I understand it, and I hope that you can make that work. So thank you for the nod, Kristen.
Mhm.
My second comment is the debt concern is the debt. Firstly, I noticed that two of the very larger items of debt were supported very, very much so by referendum and of the people of the island, and just reminded me of a comment of H.L. Mencken that democracy gives people what they want, and it gives it to them good and hard. So I would be upset if I don't think anybody can really complain about the debt because we brought it on ourselves. But is most of it 30-year term or amortization and term?
It is, it's all 30-year term at this point, other than the short-term fire truck floating rate loan.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, the Tunstall Bay one is also a short-term, a short-term loan, but the general fund, all island taxpayers supported loans are all 30 years.
Okay.
And there's some, but sorry, before I end on that, there's some really good, I think, solid reasoning for making them 30-year loans when they're all island wide for big facilities. And that is that these are capital structures and one is land. They're big, long-term, long life assets that serve a long population base for many, many years. So by stretching those loans out for a longer period, what you're actually doing is matching the cost of servicing, providing, building those assets to the people who are going to benefit from them for the maximum amount of term that you can.
Okay. No, and
Thank you, Michael. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, I agree with that. And yes, you are funding things that will last more than 30 years for the most part. So that makes perfect sense. But 30 years from now, some of the things that are now brand new and shiny will require debt. I just, my goodness, 0 to 63%. That's an acceleration rate that a Ferrari would be proud of. And I just make the general comment that just because it's permitted under the service limits doesn't mean it's always wise. But leave it in your hands. Thank you very much, Kristen. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I will tell you that I did have a lot more questions, but as I thought them up, you came up with the answers in your presentation. So that was, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I did want to, I want to just take a moment to expand a little bit on what you said with regards to the library. And I'm probably remiss in maybe skipping over that a little bit. You're right, it is a big jump in 1 year. There was a real fundamental error in the budget estimate that we used last year. I think that with the change in staff and I came in kind of on a very rushed, accelerated timeline and worked on the budget last year. And I probably didn't give it the due diligence that I typically would. I knew that the budget had been approved by the library board. I knew that it had been presented to council. I just kind of took that information and incorporated it in. it didn't become apparent to us until maybe June or July that there was a real fundamental error in budgeting last year. So, I mean, the library board, the library made very quick decisions to defer spending or not go ahead with some of the things that they had anticipated on spending on to make sure that they weren't in a deficit position at the end of the year. So kudos to Tina and the team there for really, you know, making it work with this amount of funding that was probably not adequate for what they need. The impact of that then is that we've corrected the error in the estimate for this year. So it's almost like a 2-year increase over the course of 1 year. And it does look, it looks a lot bigger than it typically would from year to year. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness, I love you characterizing the increase as a correction. That's great.
Yeah.
Kristen, we have a question from the chat. I'm just going to read it out here. So it says, can you talk a little about the impact of adjustments to the ratio in the light that some significant percentage of Bowen residents are retired/fixed income and may have limited capacity to shoulder continuously increasing property tax increases?
Adjustments to the rate, so the year-over-year jump from property taxes, I think, Betty, is what you're getting at. It's make no mistake, this is a significant year-over-year jump. I recognize that. I think all of council recognizes that. You know, there are property tax deferral options out there. I don't know if you're familiar with those programs, but for seniors on fixed income, there are options to defer property tax until such time as title changes on a property, if it can be deferred all or in part, to try and create a little more ability for seniors and people on fixed incomes to remain in their homes. You know, there are many municipalities this year that are looking at significant increases over the previous year. Like we're not alone in this situation that we're in. Again, most of ours is arising through the assumption of debt. So it shouldn't be surprising to us that we're finally now taking on those debt and those impacts of the additional interest and principal payments. But I do want you to know that nobody is suggesting that a 13.3% tax increase is not going to be felt by the majority of people on Bowen Island. Absolutely not.
Kristen, if I may add, just to add on to the opportunities for deferment extends beyond just seniors too. It also extends to families. And so it is a fairly robust program that is relatively underutilized across the province. So there is an opportunity for families to take advantage of that as well. But I agree wholeheartedly, it is not an easy increase to swallow. And it is the reality of what we're facing in terms of our aging infrastructure and it all aging out in a similar time period too.
Thank you, Liam. Betty, did I see a question with regards of shifting some of that property tax to businesses? I don't see the whole question. Are you able to read the question, Sophie?
Unmute. Yeah, my question really wasn't about deferment because like many people, I think that impacts the entire family's wealth. But the question of when I looked at the tax ratios, and I realized that's coming in a later meeting, but I don't have a sense of what the difference is between residents paying at a 1 ratio and industry paying at a 4 ratio and business paying at a 1 ratio. If business paid closer to industrial, would that shift any of the weight off residential or not?
Absolutely. Anytime that you change that distribution formula, we're over 97% residential, so the relief is going to be felt by the residential taxpayers. The amount of relief that is going to be experienced, if you were to say double the taxes on a business property, then I think the material as part of the committee of the whole agenda that we're having tomorrow, I think it shows that the relief that an average homeowner could expect to see is about $50 per year. So because there is such a small component of other classes of properties on Bowen Island, the impacts to those other classes are significant, and the relief to the residential class is quite small. So it's a consideration that's before council. There's quite a bit of information in the report, in the material for the meeting tomorrow. So anybody who hasn't seen it, I encourage you to go to the website and look at the committee of the whole material for tomorrow, which really I think presents this information in an easier context to understand. I think there's perhaps a perception that if you raise the taxes on business, the ratio, then you're going to get more money. It's important to understand you're not going to get overall any more money. You're just going to collect it more from one property tax owner versus a second type of tax owner. Michael, your hand was up again.
I did. On the question of deferment, it is a very good program, no doubt about that. But does the municipality lose that money at the time?
No,
Does the province doesn't make it up to you?
Yeah, they send us a big check for everybody's taxes.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That was my
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Bill.
Hi, I'm sorry, I can't find the little hand on my screen either. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but I'm working from a team screen on the Zoom, so it's interesting. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you very much for putting all the material online. It was available when you said it would be, and I read through it all. And I guess I'd like to start with a comment and then a question. The comment is that I really, again, strongly agree with putting annual contributions into those three capital funds so that there, you said it yourself, there's you know, some ability to some resiliency built into the process. You know, I've said this year after year, I would love to see this process earlier in the year. I've worked for municipal government, it's embarrassing to say, 50 years now. Literally, I started when I was 17 and I'm still working for municipal government. And in every government that I've ever worked with, the earlier the budget process got going, the more successful it was. So I know we have literally a new council, and I know that it couldn't have started earlier last year. The election happened when I think budget process should be underway, but I think almost as soon as you get this one done and finished, you need to go out to the department heads and get their input, not wait until, you know, way down the budget process to bring them all in and say, okay, what do you think for next year? Because obviously we're in a 5-year cycle, and a lot of next year is already well known. So it would be helpful as a ratepayer to be able to contribute much earlier. So a big yes to putting more money in consistently and constantly into the reserve funds. I did find one little question in the community center. I think you double counted the new FTEs on the community center page, the one with a picture of the community center. And it's just, I think, you said a total of 2.5 FTE will include one full-time facility manager and plus, I read, so I maybe that needs to be a bit clearer. We're talking about a total of 2.7 FTEs for it, and that this year will be only allocated a portion of the year.
That's right.
Okay. The other comment I have is the debt makes me extremely nervous. Again, I came from an era and generation when people paid down their debt. They didn't like debt. And it really, it feels to me like I'm carrying a big debt just as a member of this community that I normally wouldn't be carrying. And I think Betty is saying much the same thing. And I know from previous years that there's a core group of people that say that year after year after year. The increase in the municipal tax is not the only increase that we're going to see. There's increases in every other level of taxation. Metro is increasing theirs, the bill will include all of that, but I understand it's your purview to talk about municipal level of taxation. So the one thing I do want to suggest and ask is the one piece of the debt that isn't 30 years is on a variable rate. I'd like to suggest that it might be worth paying that down, paying the fire truck off with cash that we have in hand, whether it, and I hate to say this because, I'm a huge proponent of the community center and I know we've got to get it paid for one way or another. If the fundraising effort isn't as successful as everyone hopes it will be, certainly the money that came from the province that's being held, I'd love to see it all go to the community center. I think your math showed that it will give us a building that's there and done and not taking on even more debt. But I would suggest that some of that money maybe should go to pay off that short-term debt for the fire truck so that it's not an escalating rate. I don't see rates coming down. I mean, the world economy is in turmoil at the moment. I'm sure everyone knows that. And the turmoil is not going to end anytime soon. And that's just a suggestion. So really a comment. Very, very well done job in putting together this presentation. Thank you very much to you and your staff.
Thank you.
It was readable, it was understandable, and I wish that there was less debt attached to it, but wish in one hand and it's nothing in the other hand. So I will present some comments, I think, later in writing after I've digested everything. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I said this, I think, publicly to council in a letter earlier. It's nice to be able to have an electronic format so we don't all have to troop up to Municipal Hall in sometimes pretty inclement weather. And I also appreciate you focusing on the topic at hand and not going through the whole process of how we arrive at taxation for the general public. One last point I want to make, and that is about the mill rate. Our Bowen assessments went up again 6 to 7% this year, which infers that the mill rate should have an adjustment on that basis, because what you're dealing with in this process is a fixed number that doesn't really take into account the mill rate. So I'm ever hopeful, and so far it seems to have worked. The mill rate has come down every year, not necessarily matching the increase in the assessed value of the properties, but at least in recognition of the fact that as mill rates go up, the basic amount of taxation available to the municipality also goes up, courtesy of the assessment process run by the province. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have a small mill rate adjustment down again at the end of the process this year. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill. I do hear what you're saying about the debt. I don't want anybody to take my comments that, oh, it matches the paying for an asset over the people who are benefiting from it, in that I'm a huge supporter of debt. I feel very risk averse to debt, as I'm hearing from you as well. And there's also a reason for that, which is, given that we have that debt threshold limit, what we're doing as we increase and get closer to that limit is we're hobbling the future generation's ability to take on debt to fund the things that they need to. And given that these are long 30-year loans, we're eating into our children's generation of debt servicing capacity. So all of those debts, they even though they're 30 years, they're like a mortgage in that they're fixed for a 10-year period. They open up at
Right.
10 years, and you actually do have the opportunity after 10 years to pay some of that principal down or to pay it off in full. Whatever your cash flow situation may be, there does come an opportunity every 10 years when they open up again to refinance at that time. So if there was cash available at that end of that 10-year period, that is an option that council could consider at that time too, just in that context of you know, trying to keep the debt threshold low. I think Liam, in your former position, you mentioned to me that you would always look at communities and really what the ideal debt limit, servicing limit is to be 50% or lower of your limit. And I think ideally that's where we would want to stay in the long term.
I guess if I could just say, our experience has not been good at paying down debt when it is possible. You know, the community lands is not probably the greatest example, because council in the first place and then subsequent councils decided only to pay the interest. There was some hope that when land was sold that money would go to debt retirement, but that didn't happen. It went to the Land Opportunity Fund. And then we ended up borrowing that money back as a Cove Bay water system to pay the ever increasing cost for the Cove Bay water system. So it was useful to have that money in that account. There's no question about it. But that debt hasn't been retired very much in 17 years. So it's a great concept, but in practice, it's very difficult to do. There's always something else that's more important at the time. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Betty has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you and my appreciation for doing really user-friendly and understandable budget presentations. I think it can be quite complicated and difficult for some of us who don't operate in that territory, and I think you do a fabulous job of it, so thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Any more?
I also saw that Betty had another question in the chat earlier that we didn't get to. And it was, can you also talk about the impact of losing Cape Roger Curtis property tax over the long term?
Certainly that. So having those residential properties, in some cases, some of them are quite valuable waterfront properties. It's similar to non-market change. It's a change in classification from a taxable property to a non-taxable property. So what it does is it strips value out of the assessment roll. So typically our non-market change is positive. It effectively will increase the amount of the property tax rate that people feel like they're paying. The nominal amount may be 1 or 2% lower than what the effective rate will be, because there's less value on the assessment roll. There's fewer properties out there to spread the same amount of dollars over. So the following year, what effectively happens is that everybody else has to pay a little bit more to make up for the properties that are no longer taxable. The actual amount of revenue that we collect isn't going to change. It's not going to show up like an expense in the budget. It's not going to show up like a negative revenue. It's just going to mean that everybody else has to dig a little deeper and pay a little bit more to make up for what those properties otherwise would have paid had they retained their taxable status. There's also another piece to that, which is and I think you had asked that question in your email to me, Betty, that they are also going to become exempt for school taxes and for police taxes and all of those other taxing authorities that we collect on behalf of. But Islands Trust and Metro Vancouver, those two entities, they don't set tax rates. They just send us a bill and we pay it. So those two taxing entities, those two organizations are going to send us the same size bill that they would have if these properties had retained their taxable status. So everybody else is not only going to have to dig a little bit deeper for those properties that become exempt on the roll for municipal tax purposes, but they'll also have to pay the additional money that won't be collected from those properties for the Islands Trust and the Metro Vancouver requisition that we get each year. So it's a couple of different ways that the municipality will absorb that loss of tax revenue.
Thanks for that.
Mhm.
And if I may add to that, this is not, this is a budgetary comment, not necessarily a tax-based comment. And just on another side of the CRC coin is that if Metro Vancouver were to advance the park at the Cape Roger Curtis and Bowen Island municipality was able to leverage funding from Metro Vancouver to support some of the infrastructure challenges that we're up against, there is the potential for some positive impact on the financial plan as well. So I think it's important to always look at all the different angles. So there, while there will be a future impact to the lost tax revenue potential from the properties, there will also be a future impact of potential cost sharing of some of our infrastructure needs as well.
Thank you. I've been looking for evidence of that in the Metro Parks budget and I'm not seeing it, but you might know more than I do.
No, all I have is words verbally, which I would prefer to have written statements of fact. And so that's all I can say at this point.
So anybody else? Please do, don't hesitate to reach out. Please send an email either to that budget@bimbc.ca email address. You can email me directly at kwatson@bimbc.ca. And you can also send your feedback to the Mayor and Council email at bimbc.ca. We are going to collect all of the feedback and present it to council at an upcoming council meeting. Councillor Jurgensen, your hand was up.
No, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the presentation tonight.
My pleasure. Well, should we call it a wrap?
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Night all.